The bone drill weighed 23 pounds fully loaded, and I'd carried one for 6 years without ever thinking about the sound it made inside someone's body. That changed when the topsider woman started singing. We had her secured to the extraction rig in standard position, prone, spine exposed through the tear in her radiation suit, wrists locked at 45 degrees to prevent thrashing. The noon sun would hit in 20 minutes, and with it would come the kind of radiation that could cook a bunker-born like me from the inside out, even through our heavy suits. The alkali basin stretched around us, white salt crystals throwing back the strange blue morning light that came before the real heat. Everything out here happened on a timer. "Stop wasting time, Beck," Rusk said through the comm. He stood 10 meters away with 2 of his shooters, their rifles trained on the rocks where we'd grabbed the woman. "Drill her and let's go." The woman's song was old, something about birds and morning coffee, things that hadn't existed since the solar flare shredded the ozone 12 years back. Her voice came out rough from dehydration, but she kept the melody steady, even with the rig's restraints cutting into her wrists. Topsiders were like that. Their bodies had adapted to the radiation, thicker skin, different blood chemistry, bone marrow that could catalyze the compounds we needed for Kestrel, the drug that kept the rest of us from dying every time we stepped outside Caldera 9's shielding. I checked my dosimeter, still green, but climbing toward yellow. "Commencing extraction," I said, mostly for the mission recorder. That's when I saw the eyes in the rock shadow. Small, watching, a child, maybe 6 years old, based on the size. The woman singing wasn't delirium. It was a lullaby, a signal to stay hidden. "Contact," one of Rusk's shooters called out. "Movement in the rocks, 30 meters. "It's nothing," I said quickly. "Probably just heat distortion." Rusk crossed the distance between us in 4 strides, his suit's servos whining. Through his faceplate, I could see that eager look he got when things might turn violent. "Bullshit. There's another one." He gestured to his men. "Flush it out." The woman's singing faltered. She tried to turn her head toward the rocks, but the rig held her in place. A stream of words came out in the topsider dialect, not quite begging, but close. "Could be an adult," I said. "We should clear the area first. Don't want to get flanked during extraction." "Or," Rusk said, "it's a juvenile. You know what those are worth to the Farmer Guild. Young marrow produces 3 times the catalyst yield. My sister Tess had maybe 48 hours of Kestrel left in her system. After that, the radiation sickness would start. Fever, bleeding, organ failure. The same thing that would happen to every one of Caldera 9's 8,000 residents if we didn't maintain the supply. The math was simple. It always had been. "I'll do the woman first," I said. "Standard protocol. We secure confirmed assets before pursuing potentials." Rusk's hand moved to his sidearm. Not quite a threat, but almost. "Since when do you give the orders?" "Since the Ledger put me in charge of extraction protocols." I positioned the drill against the woman's L3 vertebra, the optimal entry point for marrow extraction. "You want to explain to the council why we lost a confirmed harvest chasing shadows?" The woman had stopped singing. Beneath her, the salt was already pink from where the restraints cut into her skin. I triggered the drill's starter motor. The tungsten bit spun up with its distinctive whine, designed to punch through the mutated bone density topsiders developed. "Movement!" the shooter called again. "It's running!" I pulled the trigger. The drill bucked in my hands as it bit into bone, the sound carrying across the salt flat. The woman screamed. They always did, no matter how many times the Ledger claimed the nerve blockers we used were humane. The marrow collection cylinder began filling with dark red fluid, almost black in the strange light. Behind Rusk, I saw the child break cover, sprinting toward the deeper wastes where our vehicles couldn't follow. 6 years old, maybe 7, running in torn plastic wrapped around its feet instead of shoes. "There," Rusk pointed. "Drop it!" His shooter raised the rifle. I shifted my weight, letting the drill's power cord tangle around my feet. When I tried to step back, I stumbled, knocking into the shooter. His shot went wide, sending up a plume of salt dust 50 meters past the running child. God damn it, Beck! By the time anyone had a clear shot again, the child had vanished into the maze of radiation-sculpted rock formations we called the maze. Even Rusk wouldn't follow in there. Too many blind corners, too many places for an ambush. The drill finished its cycle. I withdrew the bit and sealed the collection cylinder. 60 milliliters of marrow, enough for maybe 300 doses once the Farmer Guild processed it. The woman had gone quiet, unconscious from shock or blood loss. We'd leave her here. The topsiders always collected their wounded after we left, though I tried not to think about what state they were in by then. That was deliberate, Rusk said, his voice low enough that the mission recorder wouldn't pick it up clearly. You let it go. I secured the primary objective. I packed the drill away, not meeting his eyes. That's what the ledger pays us for. The ledger pays us to maximize yield. He pulled off his helmet as we reached the extraction vehicle, his scarred face flushed with anger. This is going in my report. Operational failure due to team leader negligence. The council's going to want to know why their top extractor is going soft. In the medical wing's decontamination chamber, the chemical shower stripped away any surface radiation I'd picked up topside. Standard protocol after every raid. Report to medical, get cleared, collect your ration chits. I'd done it dozens of times, but Rusk had beaten me there, and his report would already be filed. Dr. Kessel waited in the examination room, her fingers moving across a datapad that looked older than the bunker itself. The Farmer Guild controlled all medical services in Caldera 9, and Kessel was their most senior evaluator, the one who decided if you were fit for surface work or if you'd developed too much cellular damage to be useful. Sit, she said. Blood draw first. I rolled up my sleeve and watched her insert the needle. The vial filled with dark red, normal color for someone with my exposure history. 6 years of surface runs left marks you couldn't see. We all knew the statistics. Most extractors lasted 8 years before the accumulated radiation made them too sick to work. After that, if you were lucky, you got reassigned to processing or maintenance. If you weren't lucky, well, the recycling farms always needed fertilizer. Rusk filed an interesting report, Kessel said, withdrawing the needle. She sealed the blood vial and slotted it into an analysis machine that looked like it had been built from 3 different decades of technology. Claims you deliberately compromised an extraction opportunity. I secured the primary target, but not the secondary. She looked straight at me, her eyes the pale blue of someone who'd never been outside the bunker's shielding. A juvenile, according to Rusk. Those are increasingly rare. The analysis machine chimed. Kessel glanced at the display, then froze. Her fingers stopped moving across the datapad. That's not possible, she muttered, running the analysis again. What's not possible? She stood abruptly and locked the examination room door. Your blood work, she said, returning to the machine. It shows 12% expression of the topsider mutation markers. The room suddenly felt smaller. That's not right. I've been tested every month for 6 years. Yes, you have. Kessel pulled up my medical history on her pad, scrolling through screen after screen of data. Every single test showing 0% expression, clean baseline human genetics. She set the pad down carefully. Someone's been falsifying your results, Mr. Beck. For a very long time. 12%. That meant my bone marrow was already partially compatible with the mutation, producing some of the same compounds that made topsiders valuable. It meant I was changing, had been changing, maybe for years. Who? I asked. That's the question, isn't it? Kessel moved to a locked cabinet and withdrew a sealed folder, actual paper, not digital. Your original screening from 6 years ago, when you first applied for surface work. She opened it, revealing lab results with handwritten corrections in the margins. Someone very high in either medical or the council wanted you on those extraction teams. Someone who knew what you were. My mouth went dry. The council knows? They do now. A soft chime came from her terminal, an incoming priority message. She read it, her face going even paler. They're offering you a choice, Mr. Beck. One more extraction run. High yield, maximum harvest. Bring back enough marrow to cover the shortfall from today's operational failure. Or report to processing immediately for voluntary donation. Your 12% expression means your marrow could provide catalyst for approximately 600 doses, enough to keep essential personnel supplied for a month while they find your replacement. Voluntary donation. They'd strap me to the same kind of rig I'd used on hundreds of topsiders. Extract marrow from my spine, my hips, my ribs. If I was lucky, I'd survive it. Paralyzed, probably. But alive. The unlucky ones died from infection or shock. How long do I have to decide? Kessel checked her terminal again. 24 hours. The council wants your answer by tomorrow's noon briefing. She paused, then added quietly. Your sister's ration account shows 41 hours of remaining doses. I assume that factors into your decision. Tess. Always Tess. She was 16, had never been outside except through the reinforced windows of the observation deck. She didn't know what I did to keep her medicine coming. I'd made sure of that. There's something else, Kessel said, moving closer. The falsified reports. Whoever did this used medical override codes. Only 3 people have those. Myself, the chief of processing, and the council's medical liaison. She pressed a data chip into my hand. That's a copy of your real medical history, every test, every result. Maybe you can figure out who's been protecting you, and why. A sharp knock rattled the door. Dr. Kessel, Council Security. We're here for Mr. Beck. She unlocked the door, stepping back as 2 guards entered. They didn't draw their weapons, but their hands rested on them. The message was clear. 24 hours, Mr. Beck, Kessel said, as they escorted me out. I suggest you use them wisely. 6 hours after Kessel showed me my real blood work, I carried 60 milliliters of topsider marrow into processing floor Beta 7. The refinery ran 3 levels below the main bunker, far enough down that you could hear the ground shift when the tectonic plates adjusted to the radiation-induced thermal expansion above. Most people never came down here. They took their doses and tried not to think about where the medicine came from. Technician Morse stood at the primary centrifuge, adjusting dials on a control panel that had been patched and repatched until the original manufacturer's labels were buried under layers of electrical tape and handwritten warnings. He was maybe 50, had worked the refineries since before the flare, back when this equipment processed legitimate pharmaceuticals instead of harvested body fluids. You're early, he said. The noon batch isn't supposed to arrive for another 2 hours. Special delivery. Rusk wants this processed immediately. Says we're behind quota. Morse turned to me and I saw the exhaustion carved into his face. Red-rimmed eyes, tremor in his left hand, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from working double shifts for weeks. We're always behind quota. The yields keep dropping, but the council keeps demanding the same output. He took the cylinder from me, checking the label. Single source, adult female. He connected it to the intake port, a modified fuel injection system someone had jerry-rigged to handle biological material. You know we're running the centrifuge at twice the recommended speed. Only way to meet processing targets. The machine behind him groaned, a deep mechanical complaint. Through the observation window I could see the crystallization chamber, a reinforced glass cylinder where the refined marrow compounds were flash-frozen into the white crystals that became kestrel. The crystals formed in patterns like frost on a window, if frost could scream at frequencies just below human hearing. How many doses will that cylinder make? I asked. Maybe 300, if we're lucky. The concentration's been dropping in the newer harvests. Morse initiated the processing sequence, and the centrifuge spun up with a rising whine. The topsiders are adapting. developing resistance to our extraction methods. Their bodies are learning to protect the marrow, making it harder to catalyze. 3 other technicians worked nearby stations, each managing different stages of the refinement process. The cramped space barely contained all the equipment, machines stacked on machines, tubes and pipes running between them like infected veins. Everything vibrated with the rhythm of overworked motors. "Pressure warning on chamber 3, one of the technicians called out. A young woman whose name I'd never learned, though I'd delivered marrow to her station dozens of times. "It'll hold," Morse said, but he moved toward the warning panel anyway. "Has to hold. We can't afford another shutdown." That's when I noticed his notebook, leather-bound, pages yellowed, sitting open on his workstation. The visible page showed chemical formulas, but also something else, a diagram of human DNA with sections labeled blocked expression points and suppressed adaptation markers. The centrifuge's whine climbed higher. "Morse," the young technician said, backing away from her station. "The pressure." The crystallization chamber cracked, not all at once, but in a spiderweb pattern that started at the base and climbed towards the sealed top. The sound it made was almost musical, like a wine glass singing just before it shatters. "Everyone out," Morse said, but it was too late. The chamber exploded with a cloud of superfine bone dust and partially crystallized kestrel. The powder hung in the air like snow, drifting down in slow motion. I covered my mouth and nose, but I could already taste it. The young technician had taken the worst of it. The blast had driven crystal shards into her chest and face. She dropped to her knees, trying to speak through the blood. Morse dragged himself across the floor. His left leg bent at an angle that legs shouldn't bend. Glass had opened his scalp and blood ran into his eyes, but he kept crawling toward his notebook. "Have to. Burn it," he gasped when I knelt beside him. "Can't let them know I figured it out." He grabbed my wrist. "Kestrel doesn't protect us. It prevents us from adapting. Every dose locks our DNA tighter, keeps us from developing the mutation." He coughed, specks of red hitting the contaminated floor. "We could survive up there. Our bodies want to change, to adapt like the topsiders did. But the drug, it keeps us dependent, keeps us harvesting." Emergency containment protocols kicked in. Thick bulkheads slammed down over every exit, sealing Beta 7 from the rest of the bunker. Standard procedure for a contamination event. Lock it down, pump out the air, incinerate everything inside once the all clear came. "The Council knows," Morse whispered. "They've always known. It's not medicine, it's a leash." He pressed the notebook into my hands, his blood smearing across the leather cover. Page 47. The real synthesis process. How to make kestrel without blocking adaptation. I was going to tell everyone. His grip loosened. His eyes focused on something past my shoulder, past everything. Around me, the other technicians were dead or dying, their bodies covered in the white dust that was worth more than all our lives combined. The air was getting thinner. The containment system had started its purge cycle. But there, an emergency maintenance hatch in the corner, one that led to the tertiary cooling pipes. It would be a tight fit, and the pipes were half flooded with radioactive coolant, but it was better than suffocating or burning. I shoved Morse's notebook inside my suit and crawled toward the hatch, leaving bloody handprints on the contaminated floor. Behind me, the refinery's death rattle echoed through the sealed chamber, and 60 milliliters of topsider marrow burned with everything else. The maintenance hatch gave way on the third pull, and I dropped into knee-deep coolant that immediately ate through the weak points in my suit's joints. The tertiary cooling pipes ran parallel to the main bunker for about 200 meters before hitting the old mining network. If I could make it that far without the radioactive water burning through to bone. I crawled forward in absolute darkness, feeling my way along pipes that were never meant for a human body. The coolant was warm, warmer than it should be, which meant the heat exchangers were failing too. Everything in Caldera 9 was failing, had been failing for years, held together by rationing and lies and the bodies of the people we harvested. My left boot split at the ankle seal. The coolant found flesh immediately, a cold burn that turned hot, then numb. I kept moving. Behind me, I could hear the incinerator cycle starting. 2000 degrees Celsius to sterilize Beta 7. Morse and the others would be ash within minutes. The pipe junction came up faster than expected. I felt the space open up, the coolant dropping to ankle deep as the pipes widened into a maintenance reservoir. Emergency lighting here. Dim red strips that ran on independent batteries. I could see the access ladder, the one that led up to Mining Tunnel 3. That's when I heard voices above. Security teams searching for survivors. Swept Beta 6 and 8, nothing. If anyone made it out, they'd have come through here. Check the reservoir anyway. Council wants confirmation on all personnel. I pressed myself against the wall, standing in radioactive water while 2 guards descended halfway down the ladder. Their lights swept the reservoir, passed over me twice. My suit's radiation shielding must have been just thick enough to hide my heat signature. They left after 3 minutes. I waited another 5 before climbing. Mining Tunnel 3 hadn't been used since the last tectonic event cracked its support structure. The council had sealed it rather than repair it, cheaper to abandon than maintain. But the seals were from the inside, meant to keep people from entering, not leaving. The emergency release still worked. The tunnel ran for 6 kilometers towards the surface, angling up through geological layers that predated the flare. My legs were going numb from the coolant burns, but I couldn't stop. Morse's notebook dug into my ribs, its pages holding the truth that had killed him. Kestrel doesn't protect us, it prevents us from adapting. Tess had been on the drug since she was 4 years old. 12 years of doses, 12 years of her body being locked out of its own evolution. The same for everyone in Caldera 9. We weren't being saved, we were being kept. The tunnel's exit emerged in the equipment cache 2 kilometers from the bunker's main structure. Pre-dawn darkness covered the salt flats, that strange purple-black that came before the blue morning light. I found an emergency supply locker with a functioning suit, older model, but intact. My legs screamed when I peeled off the contaminated gear. The coolant had taken layers of skin, left the flesh underneath raw and weeping. I had maybe 18 hours before the council noticed I wasn't among Beta 7's confirmed dead. After that, they'd locked down everything, including Tess's ration account. But if I went back now, tried to get her out, no. Security would be watching everyone connected to the disaster. I needed leverage first. Options. The topsiders had those options. The medical kit in the cache contained old formula burn spray, the kind that sealed wounds with a polymer coating. I emptied the entire canister on my legs, watching the foam harden into something like new skin. It would hold for maybe a day before needing real treatment. I transferred Morse's notebook to the new suit, checked the radiation readings, still safe for another 10 hours, and started walking toward the bone orchard. It was 8 kilometers through alkali territory, through the killing fields where we'd hunted topsiders for 6 years. The woman from yesterday, her extraction site was still marked by blood-darkened salt. No body. The alkali had already collected her, taken her back to attempt whatever healing they could manage after what I'd done to her spine. Her child would be with her, the one I'd let escape. Maybe that act of small mercy would buy me an audience. Maybe they'd just kill me on sight. Either way, I was out of options that didn't end with me on an extraction table or Tess dying from radiation poisoning. The council's 24-hour deadline meant nothing now. The refinery was gone, Morse was dead, and I carried the proof that our entire civilization was built on a deliberate lie. The bone orchard appeared on the horizon as the first blue light touched the salt, those calcium trees reaching up like accusations from the earth. 8 hours after crawling through radioactive coolant to escape my own people's incinerator, I walked into enemy territory carrying the secrets that could save or damn us all. The bone orchard wasn't really an orchard. It was what the topsiders called the forest of calcium deposits that grew where their dead had been planted in the early days after the flare. The radiation did something to bones left in the alkaline soil, made them spread like tree roots, pushing up through the earth in white branches that caught moonlight like bleached coral. The Alkali clan used it as neutral ground for the few times they needed to deal with outsiders. Elder Numa waited near the largest formation, a structure that might have been 3 or 4 bodies wound together into something resembling a tree. She wore no radiation suit, just layers of treated hide that left her arms bare. Her skin had the distinctive thickness of a full topsider, mottled brown and grey, with raised ridges along the major blood vessels where the mutation had reinforced her circulatory system. Beside her stood a younger man, maybe 30, carrying a medical bag that looked stolen from a bunker supply run. "You're the one who let the child go," Numa said. "The girl made it home. Told us about the extractor who stumbled at just the right moment. She stepped closer. Also told us you still took her mother. I had to. Your sister needs medicine. All your people need medicine." She circled me slowly, studying. "But what if I told you the medicine is the poison?" The younger man spoke up. "Elder, we should test him first. Make sure he's really converting. Patience, Dre." But she nodded. "Show me your hand." I pulled off my glove. She grabbed my wrist, brought it to her face, and ran her tongue across my palm. The contact burned, her saliva slightly acidic. Another adaptation. She held the taste in her mouth for a moment, then spat into the dust. 12%, maybe 13. "You're turning, but slowly." She released my hand. "In the old world, they'd call you a slow bloomer. Here, you're just another body catching up to what the sun wants us to become." "The refinery's destroyed," I said. "The bunker has maybe 36 hours of kestrel left. After that, your people die or adapt. Natural selection, working as intended." She gestured to Dre. "Show him." Dre opened his medical bag and withdrew tools I recognized. Extraction needles, collection vials, but modified. The needles were thinner, designed for surface draws rather than deep drilling. He rolled up his own sleeve, revealing arms covered in small, healed puncture scars. "We learned this from a bunker doctor who defected 3 years ago," Dre explained. 20% yield compared to your method, but the donor walks away. Can work again in 2 weeks. No paralysis, no death. He demonstrated on himself, sliding the needle into a scarred spot near his elbow. The vial filled slowly with dark marrow, maybe 10 milliliters. It's enough to make 40 doses if processed correctly. The Council would never accept that yield. The Council needs control, Numa interrupted. They need scarcity. If people knew that small, voluntary donations could keep everyone alive, what excuse would they have for the raids? For the murder? She was right. Morse had been right. Everyone who'd suspected had been right, and we'd all been too afraid or too comfortable to act on it. "I have information," I said, pulling out the notebook. "From a refinery technician. He figured out how to synthesize kestrel without blocking adaptation. The Council killed him for it, even if they'll call it an accident." Numa took the notebook, scanning the pages by moonlight. Her expression didn't change, but Dre sucked in a sharp breath when he read over her shoulder. "This could work," Dre said. "With this formula and our extraction method. We could offer both," Numa finished. "Medicine for those who choose it, adaptation for those who don't." She closed the notebook and looked at me. "But information isn't free, Extractor. Neither is trust. You want our help saving your bunker? We need collateral." "What kind of collateral?" "Your sister. Tess, isn't it? 16 years old, never been exposed to surface radiation." Her voice stayed matter-of-fact. "She comes here, lives with us for 6 months. We teach her our ways, let her body begin adapting naturally. In exchange, we share the extraction protocol with your people. She'll die. She's never been outside. She'll change, slowly, carefully with our help. or she'll die in 36 hours when the kestrel runs out. Numa stepped back toward the bone trees. You have until dawn to decide. Come back with the girl, or don't come back at all. And if the council won't accept your terms, then we defend ourselves. We've been preparing for your final raid for years. She smiled, showing teeth filed to points. Did you think we didn't know it was coming? Your foreman Rusk has been promising total extermination to anyone who'd listen. Dre packed away his equipment. Dawn, Extractor. 6 hours to choose between your old life and something new. They disappeared into the bone forest, leaving me alone with the calcium trees. Back at the bunker, Tess was sleeping, trusting me to keep her safe like I always had. 6 hours to decide if saving her meant delivering her to the people I'd been taught to see as resources. 6 hours to choose between two different kinds of survival. The climb back down from the bone orchard took 3 hours. My legs screamed with every step, the polymer coating on my burns cracking where the joints flexed. I'd left the alkali with their offer in my skull. Bring Tess to them by dawn, or never return. Dawn was already here. I was out of time. I entered Caldera 9 through the old mining tunnels, the ones nobody used anymore because the support beams groaned whenever a hauler passed overhead. The bunker's lower levels were quiet. The refinery disaster should have triggered emergency protocols, klaxons wailing, everyone scrambling to secure the remaining kestrel stores. Instead, the corridors sat empty, the overhead lights dimmed to their night cycle despite the hour. I found the reason at central shaft access. 20 people clustered around the main freight lift, not maintenance crews or shift workers, but armed extraction teams. Full raid gear, respirators, drill kits, tactical lights mounted on reinforced vests. I recognized faces from half a dozen different crews, all standing together in a way that never happened. Foreman didn't cooperate. We competed for yield quotas, for council favor, for the choicest assignments. Unless someone had given them all the same assignment. Rusk stood at the lift controls, his broad frame silhouetted against the status panel's glow. He saw me and smiled. Beck, didn't expect to see you again after Beta 7. He gestured at the assembled crews. We thought you'd gone up with the refinery. The emergency seal malfunctioned. I kept my voice flat, gave him nothing to work with. Maintenance hatch let me out through the cooling system. Lucky. He didn't sound like he believed in luck. Council declared the refinery a total loss 2 hours ago. 60 milliliters of processed marrow. Gone. That puts us at critical shortage. The crews were loading gear onto the lift platform. Too much gear for a standard extraction run. I counted 12 bone drill kits, 6 portable containment rigs, enough respirators for an extended surface operation. Where's the rest of medical? I asked. Dr. Kessel should be coordinating emergency ration protocols. Medical's been relieved of operational authority. Rusk tapped the control panel, and the lift platform descended 1/2 meter, aligning with the loading deck. Council's invoking wartime measures. Total resource mobilization. Wartime. We hadn't used that designation since the first decade after the flare, when the bunker was still losing 3 people a week to surface raids and equipment failure. I watched the crews load their gear, each one checking their dosimeter and respirator seals. What's the target? I already knew, had to hear him say it anyway. All of them. Rusk stepped onto the platform. Elder Numa's settlement. The Bone Orchard hives, every topsider warren within 20 kilometers. Council wants total clearance. No more negotiations, no more measured harvests. We take everything they have, burn what we can't carry. The crews were climbing onto the lift now, filling the platform with bodies and equipment. I stayed where I was, at the edge of the loading deck, trying to process what Rusk was describing. Extermination. That's what this was. Then I saw Tess. She lay on a supply pallet at the back of the platform, her small frame half hidden behind a stack of containment rigs. Someone had dressed her in a surface suit 3 sizes too large. The The sleeves rolled up past her wrists. Her eyes were closed, head lolled to one side. I was moving before I decided to move, shoving past 2 crew members to reach the pallet. Her pulse beat steady under my fingers, but her breathing came shallow and slow. Sedation. They'd drugged her. "She's insurance," Rusk said behind me. "Council figured you might have trouble with the new operational parameters given your recent judgment lapses. This way you're motivated to see the mission through." My hand found the bone drill kit at my belt. "You had no authority to bring her topside." "I had every authority." Council voted unanimously. He nodded at the crews surrounding us, all of them armed, all of them watching. "New protocol. Every foreman brings a dependent as operational guarantee. Ensures nobody gets creative when the dust starts falling." The lift groaned, beginning its ascent toward the surface levels. Rusk had already activated it. We were rising through the shaft, the bunker's lower levels dropping away beneath us. I looked at the control panel. Standard freight lift design, the same mechanism I'd operated 100 times. Chain drive, emergency brake, manual override. The brake required 2 hands and significant force to engage mid-ascent. Doing it would stop the lift between levels, trap everyone in the shaft until someone from below could reverse the mechanism. It would also make me a traitor. Council orders were absolute during wartime mobilization. The lift continued climbing. Through the shaft's reinforced windows, I caught glimpses of the bunker's mid-levels sliding past, storage bays, processing facilities, the sealed doors of Beta 7 still glowing with containment warnings. Tess's breathing hadn't changed. She had maybe 30 hours of Kestrel left in her system before the radiation damage became irreversible. 30 hours to choose between helping Rusk slaughter the people who'd offered to save her, or becoming a traitor to the only home I'd ever known. The lift jolted. A grinding sound rattled up the shaft, something wrong with the chain mechanism. One of the crew members checked his dosimeter and swore. "Dust surge," he said. "Big one. We need to clear the shaft before it hits." Rusk slammed his palm against the control panel, trying to coax more speed from the lift. The grinding intensified. Through the windows, I saw a wall of particulate matter rolling through the shaft from above, the kind of radioactive dust surge that could kill an unprotected person in minutes. The lights failed. Emergency systems kicked in half a second later, bathing everything in red. I reached for the brake. The brake engaged with a sound like breaking teeth. Metal screamed against metal as the chain mechanism locked, and the lift platform lurched to a stop so violently that half the crew went down. Equipment scattered across the grating. Drill kits, respirators, someone's dosimeter cracking against a support beam. Russ caught himself on the control panel, his face twisting as he understood what I'd done. The dust hit 3 seconds later. It poured through the gaps in the shaft's service hatches, a grainy red fog that turned the emergency lighting into something thick and drowning. I could taste it immediately. That sharp mineral burn that meant the particles were small enough to bypass the respirator filters we weren't wearing. Everyone started coughing at once, 20 people choking in the darkness while the lift swayed on its locked chain. "Emergency respirators," someone said. But the equipment was scattered across the platform now, lost in the chaos. I grabbed Tess's pallet and dragged it toward the shaft wall, away from the worst of the dust cloud. Her suit had a sealed hood. She'd be protected for a few minutes at least. My own throat was already raw, each breath pulling radiation deeper into my lungs. The dosimeter at my belt started clicking, a sound like insects dying. Rusk came at me through the red murk. I saw his bulk moving, heard his boots on the grating. Then his fist caught me below the ribs and I went down hard. The impact drove whatever air I had left out of my lungs. He dropped onto me, one knee pinning my chest, his hands finding my throat. "Council gave you a choice," he said, squeezing. "You chose wrong." I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. My vision started narrowing, red emergency light fading to black at the edges. Somewhere behind us, crew members were scrambling for respirators, shouting warnings about radiation levels. The dosimeter kept clicking, faster now. My hand found the bone drill at my belt. I drove it into Rusk's thigh, just above the knee where the joint had no armor. The tungsten bit punched through fabric and muscle, and Rusk's grip on my throat went slack as he bellowed and tried to pull away. I twisted the drill. He fell sideways, clutching his leg, and I rolled out from under him. My throat felt crushed, each breath coming in a thin wheeze. The dust was everywhere now, coating every surface, getting into my eyes and mouth. "You're dead," Rusk gasped, trying to stand on his damaged leg. "Council will—" The lift cable snapped. Not the main cable, one of the support lines weakened by the dust surge and the strain of the emergency brake. It whipped through the air, caught Rusk across the chest, and knocked him backward into the shaft railing. The railing gave way. Corroded metal, stressed beyond its limits. He went over the edge without a sound. I crawled to where he'd fallen and looked down. The shaft dropped away into darkness, emergency lights showing nothing but dust and empty air. "Foreman Beck?" One of the crew members appeared beside me, respirator already sealed over his face. He offered me a spare. "We need to get out of this dust." I took the respirator, pressed it to my face, and felt the seal activate. Cleaner air, but my lungs were already compromised. I could feel the damage starting, that deep ache that meant the radiation had found living tissue. "Lift won't move," another crew member reported from the control panel. "Chains locked solid. We're stuck between levels." I checked Tess. Still breathing, still unconscious. The sealed hood on her suit showed no breaches. She'd be fine as long as the sedation wore off before we ran out of time. The shaft around us groaned, metal settling under stress. Through the dust I could see the service hatches, all sealed from the inside, designed to prevent exactly this kind of contamination from spreading to the bunker's inhabited levels. We were trapped in a vertical coffin, radiation levels climbing with every second. A younger crew member pointed at something above us, barely visible through the haze. "Emergency access. Maintenance route to the surface loading bay." I followed his gesture and saw a small hatch set into the shaft wall, marked with faded yellow paint. The kind of exit point that maintenance teams used when the main lift was offline. It would lead up, through the outer shell of the bunker, to the surface level where supply trucks used to dock before the flare made regular surface operations impossible. Surface level. Where the radiation was strongest, where the dust surges originated. Where nobody went without full protective gear and a death wish. Where the alkali lived. "We can't go up," one of the crew members said, checking his dosimeter. "Radiation's already critical here. Surface level will kill us in an hour. Staying here will kill us in 20 minutes. I lifted Tess's pallet, testing the weight. The crew member was right. Going up was suicide. But going down meant sealed hatches and automated contamination protocols that would keep us locked in the shaft until the radiation cooked us from the inside out. The choice wasn't between good and bad. It was between dying fast or dying slow. I started climbing toward the emergency hatch, dragging Tess's pallet behind me. The polymer coating on my legs cracked with each movement, and I felt blood seeping through. My lungs burned with every breath despite the respirator. Behind me, the crew members were arguing, their voices distorted through the dust. Then the first one started climbing after me. Then another. They'd done the same calculation I had. Up was impossible, but down was guaranteed death. The emergency hatch's wheel lock fought me for 30 seconds before the corroded mechanism gave way. The hatch swung open and light poured through. Daylight. The surface. I pulled myself and Tess through the hatch and into a cargo bay that hadn't been used in 15 years. Dust covered everything, undisturbed until now. The outer bay doors were partially collapsed, leaving a gap wide enough to see the salt flats beyond. And standing in that gap, backlit by noon radiation, were 3 figures in adapted skin. Alkali scouts, their bodies showing the bone ridges and thickened dermis that came from generations of surface life. One of them approached, and I recognized the voice even before I saw her face. "You're late, Extractor," Elder Numa said, "and you brought friends." "These aren't friends," I said, keeping my eyes on Numa while dragging Tess's pallet farther from the hatch. "They were coming to kill you." I stopped them. Behind me, crew members were climbing through the hatch one by one, coughing and stumbling into the daylight. 8 had made it so far, maybe 10 more still in the shaft. Their respirators were coated in red dust, and their dosimeters were screaming warnings that didn't matter anymore. We were all contaminated. Numa tilted her head, studying the emerging survivors. "You stopped them by bringing them to our doorstep?" "I stopped them by crashing the lift." My throat felt like ground glass. "Rusk is dead. The Council's extermination order died with him. For now." One of the scouts moved closer, a young man with bone ridges along his jawline that caught the light like polished stone. "More will come." The noon radiation bore into me. I could feel it working through my suit, through my skin, finding the mutation markers that medical had hidden for 16 years. My vision sharpened in ways that didn't make sense. I could see individual grains of salt on the bay's floor, could track the scouts' breathing patterns, could sense the heat differential between shadow and light. Tess stirred on the pallet. A small sound, but it pulled my attention like a gunshot. I knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Too fast. The sedation was wearing off and she was waking into a nightmare. Full radiation exposure, no kestrel in her system for the past 6 hours, her body starting to realize what was happening to it. "I need medication," I said, turning to the nearest crew member. "Emergency kestrel. You're carrying doses." He pulled a small case from his vest. 3 vials, each one containing enough concentrated kestrel for a single emergency administration. I grabbed one, snapped off the cap, and pressed the injector against Tess's neck. The dose hissed into her bloodstream. She convulsed. Her back arched off the pallet, every muscle locking rigid. Her eyes snapped open but didn't focus on anything. Blood started seeping from her nose, then her ears. The kestrel was supposed to suppress radiation damage, supposed to keep her cells from tearing themselves apart. Instead, it was killing her faster. "What did you give her?" Numa crossed the bay in 4 long strides and pushed me aside. She pressed her fingers against Tess's throat, feeling the pulse hammering there. "This is kestrel. Emergency dose. Pure concentration. It's poison!" Numa looked at the scout with the bone ridges. "Dre, get the kit." "She needs kestrel," I said. "Without it, the radiation will..." "The radiation is already killing her. Your medicine is making it worse." Numa held Tess's head as another convulsion hit. "How long has she been taking kestrel?" "Since she was 6. Then her body doesn't remember how to fight radiation on its own. The drug crippled her adaptation response." Numa looked at me and her eyes held pity. "She's been dependent on stolen marrow her entire life. Now that marrow is trying to reject her." Dre returned with a leather pack, but Numa waved it away. She was staring at me now, her expression changing from pity to interest. Calculation. "You're changing," she said. I looked down at my hands. The skin had thickened, taken on a texture like worn leather. The polymer coating on my legs had split completely, but underneath, the burns were healing. Not scarring, healing. New tissue growing at a visible rate, pink and raw but functional. The noon light felt different now, not like a weight, but like pressure against a door I could choose to open. My bones ached, but it was the ache of growth, not damage. The mutation markers in my blood were expressing themselves, triggered by radiation exposure that should have killed me. I was adapting. Fast. "How much marrow have you extracted over your career?" Numa asked. "I don't know. Hundreds of draws." "And you never wondered why you were so good at finding us? Why you could track alkali better than any other extractor?" She touched my forearm, her fingers tracing the thickening dermis. Latent carriers absorb trace markers from every extraction. Your body has been learning from us for years. All it needed was the right trigger. Tess convulsed again, worse this time. Her lips were turning blue. "Can you save her?" I asked. Numa looked at Tess, then at me. "Not with what I have. Her body is rejecting everything. The kestrel, the radiation, her own damaged cells. She needs compatible marrow from someone who's actively adapting. Someone whose cells are learning how to survive surface exposure in real time." She meant me. I pulled the bone drill from my belt. The tungsten bit was still bloody from Rusk's leg, but that didn't matter. I pressed the drill against my hip, just above the iliac crest where the marrow was richest. The trigger was designed to puncture topsider bone, to extract living tissue for processing. Using it on myself would hurt in ways I couldn't imagine. The drill bit through skin and muscle and found bone. The pain was immediate and absolute, wiping out every other sensation. I heard myself make a sound. Not quite a scream, more like something breaking. The drill's reservoir filled with dark red marrow, enough for a full transfusion. I pulled the drill free and nearly blacked out. Blood poured down my leg, hot and too fast. Numa caught me before I fell, guided me down beside Tess's pallet. "Give me the reservoir," she said. I handed it over. She worked quickly, connecting the reservoir to a manual syringe, drawing the marrow into the chamber. Tess had stopped convulsing, but that was worse. It meant her body was shutting down, giving up. Numa pressed the syringe against Tess's sternum and pushed the plunger. My marrow flowed into my sister's chest, fresh and living and full of whatever my body had learned in the past hour. After 10 seconds, she gasped. A full breath, her first real breath since the convulsions started. Color returned to her lips. The blood stopped seeping from her ears. She opened her eyes and looked at me. "Jaro, where are we?" "Somewhere safe," I lied. Then, because she deserved the truth, somewhere new. Numa stood, studying both of us with an expression I couldn't read. Behind her, the crew members were watching in silence, their contaminated respirators hanging loose around their necks. They'd seen everything, the transfusion, my adaptation, Tess's recovery. They'd seen me become something the bunker would never take back. "She'll need more doses," Numa said, addressing me but including the watching crew members. "Your marrow bought her 12 hours, maybe 20. After that, she'll need another transfusion or she'll need to adapt on her own." She paused. "Which means you all need to make a choice. Go back down that shaft to your bunker and die from contamination. Or stay here and learn what we've learned. But if you stay, you help us teach the rest of your people that survival doesn't require taking everything from someone else." I looked at Tess, at her eyes focusing on the blue sky above us, seeing it clearly for the first time in her life, without reinforced glass between her and the world. My hip was still bleeding. My body was still changing, and I had no idea if what I'd just done would save her or just delay the inevitable. But she was breathing, and I felt like I'd made the right choice. The adaptation took 3 days. I spent the first day unconscious, my body rewriting itself at the cellular level. Numa told me later that I'd stopped breathing twice, that my heart had stuttered and restarted on its own, that the bone ridges growing along my spine had cracked through the skin and bled for 6 hours straight. Tess sat beside me the entire time, holding my hand while her own body fought its smaller, slower battle with the surface. The crew members scattered. Some tried to return to the bunker through the shaft before the contamination made them too sick to climb. I heard later that medical refused to let them back in. Protocol demanded a 72-hour quarantine for anyone exposed to critical radiation, and the bunker didn't have 72 hours to spare. The sealed hatches stayed sealed. 3 crew members stayed with the alkali. 2 died within 48 hours, their bodies unable to make the transition. The third, a young foreman named Karis, started showing signs of adaptation on the second day. Numa said his markers were strong, maybe as strong as mine had been. Maybe he'd survive. I woke on the morning of the fourth day with new skin. It had thickened across my arms and back, forming plates that overlapped like scales. Not quite bone, not quite keratin. Something in between that dispersed radiation the way the alkali's bodies did. My hands had changed the most. The fingers were longer, the joints restructured for better grip and fine motor control. When I flexed them, I could feel the new tendons sliding against modified bone. Tess was sleeping on a mat beside me, her breathing steady. Her skin hadn't developed plates, but it had darkened several shades, and fine ridges had begun forming along her forearms. She was adapting more slowly than I had, but she was adapting. In another week, she might not need my marrow anymore. Numa found me outside the alkali settlement, standing in the noon radiation that no longer burned. The light felt like warm water now, something my skin drank and converted into energy I didn't fully understand. My dosimeter sat silent on my belt, maxed out days ago and no longer relevant. "The bunker made contact," she said. "Radio transmission. They want to negotiate." I turned to look at her. She'd aged 10 years in 3 days, the stress of hosting contaminated bunker refugees showing in the new lines around her eyes. Negotiate what? They have 6 weeks of Kestrel remaining in storage. After that, everyone inside starts dying. She handed me a small radio unit, the kind we'd used for surface operations. "They're asking for you specifically. They know you're alive. They know you've changed." I pressed the transmit button and heard the static clear. "This is Beck," I said. "Foreman Beck." The voice belonged to someone from the Ledger Council, not Dr. Kessel, but one of the senior administrators. "We understand you survived the shaft incident. We also understand you've undergone unauthorized biological modification. I adapted. Same thing your suppressant drug prevents everyone else from doing." Silence on the other end, stretching for 10 seconds. Then, "We're prepared to discuss alternative arrangements. The refinery is a total loss, but we have the technical specifications. Given adequate resources, we could rebuild production in 4 months, using consensual donations, negotiated at fair compensation rates." The administrator's voice stayed carefully neutral. "We're also prepared to share Kestrel production with the alkali population, creating a mutual dependency that benefits both groups." I looked at Numa. She shook her head once, a small gesture that said everything. "Your drug doesn't just suppress radiation damage," I said into the radio. "It suppresses adaptation. You've been keeping everyone dependent on extractions because people who adapt don't need you anymore. Morse figured it out. He wrote it all down before Beta 7 melted." I'd spent the past 3 days reading the technician's notebook, deciphering his cramped handwriting and chemical formulas. Kestrel works by hijacking the adaptation pathway, replacing it with temporary cellular repair fueled by foreign marrow. You created artificial dependency where natural survival was possible. More silence. When the administrator spoke again, the careful neutrality was gone. "Natural adaptation has a 9% survival rate among bunker population. 91% of people die within a week of surface exposure. Kestrel gave us a controlled alternative. It gave us civilization." "It gave you control," I said. "There's a difference." "What do you want, Beck?" I looked at Tess, still sleeping in the shelter. At Karis, sitting with 2 alkali teachers who were showing him how to identify safe water sources by the salt crystal patterns. At Numa, watching me with her filed teeth and her bone ridges and her people who'd survived without stealing pieces of each other. "I want my sister to live," I said. "I want the people trapped in your bunker to have a choice that doesn't involve dying or killing. I want you to stop pretending the only way to survive is by taking everything from someone else. Those aren't terms. Those are fantasies." "Then here are terms." I gripped the radio hard enough that the plastic casing cracked. "I come back. You study what happened to me. The full adaptation sequence. Everything Morse wrote down. All of it. You develop a protocol that gives people a choice between kestrel dependency and guided adaptation. Those who want to try adaptation get support and medical supervision. Those who can't or won't adapt keep receiving kestrel through consensual donations from alkali volunteers at compensation rates Numa sets, not you. I released the transmit button and looked at Numa. What do you think? She studied me for a long moment. I think you're still trying to save people who'd put you on an extraction table if they could. I also think you're the first person from that bunker who's ever offered us anything except violence. She took the radio from my damaged hands. We'll agree to donations, limited draws, rotated volunteers, medical oversight on both sides. But the first person who tries to establish extraction quotas or efficiency metrics, the agreement ends. I nodded. That was fair. More than fair. The administrator's voice crackled back. The council needs 48 hours to review your proposal. You have 24, Numa said, leaning over the radio. After that, we relocate our settlement beyond your operational range. You'll be on your own. She switched off the radio before they could respond. We stood in the noon light. My skin was still changing, still learning how to process radiation into something useful. In another week, I'd be something neither bunker nor alkali, something new. You know they'll study you like a specimen, Numa said. Take tissue samples, run experiments, try to replicate what happened without understanding it. I know. And you're going back anyway. I looked at the salt flats stretching toward the horizon, at the calcium trees marking graves of the first adapted generation, at the collapsed cargo bay where my old life had ended 3 days ago. Tess would need more transfusions, maybe 3 or 4 more before her body learned to sustain itself. Karis would need guidance. The crew members who died deserved to be remembered as more than failed extractions. Someone has to teach them, I said. Someone who knows both sides. Someone who's paid the price for surviving. Numa smiled her filed-toothed smile. Then you'd better heal fast. You still bleed like a bunker rat. She was right. Blood seeped through the new skin on my hip where I'd drilled myself, and my spine ached where the bone ridges were still settling into their final configuration. I'd carry the scars forever, visible proof that adaptation cost something, that transformation required sacrifice, that survival was never as simple as taking what you needed from someone weaker. But Tess was breathing. Karis was learning. And somewhere below us in the bunker's sealed corridors, people were making calculations about how much they valued control versus how much they valued living. In 24 hours, I'd go back down. I'd let them study the changes, share Morse's research, help develop protocols that might give others a chance at what I'd stumbled into. Some would adapt. Most wouldn't. That was the truth Kestrel had hidden. Survival wasn't democratic, wasn't fair, wasn't something you could guarantee with the right drug and enough stolen marrow. But choice mattered. Consent mattered. And maybe, if enough people survived the transition, we could build something that didn't require grinding other people into medicine just to see another day. Tess stirred in the shelter, called my name. I went to her, my modified hands clumsy but gentle, and helped her sit up. She looked at me with eyes that were learning to see in wavelengths the bunker had filtered out, touched the bone ridges on my spine and didn't flinch. You look different, she said. I am different. Does it hurt? Yes. I wouldn't lie to her, not about this. But it stops hurting eventually. And then you're something new. She nodded, processing that. Then, will I look like you? I don't know. Everyone adapts differently. I helped her stand, supported her weight until her legs remembered how to work. But whatever you become, I'll be here. We walked outside together into the light that no longer meant death, past the calcium trees that marked endings and beginnings, toward a future that neither bunker nor alkali had imagined possible. Behind us, the radio sat silent, waiting for the council's answer. But I already knew what they'd say. Because when the alternative was extinction, Even the people who'd built their civilization on control learned to compromise. The salt flats stretched endlessly in every direction, white and brutal and indifferent. But somewhere in that emptiness, my sister was learning to survive without stealing pieces of anyone else. That was enough. That was everything.